Program.
Morning.
Good. All right. So, Trevor, let's begin with you. You obviously presenting the discussion document. Trevor, I beg your pardon. No, Alex, you presented the document, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Alex, let me begin with you. I beg your pardon. Tell me the contents of it. What was discussed?
Well, it's raising an important issue about the diagnostic, firstly, for that attempts to explain why we have very substantial structural unemployment and inequality in South Africa. And it talks essentially to a potential missing element of the National Development Plan, which is that in fact our levels of income inequality in South Africa are one of the structural driving contributors to unemployment due to the manner in which it impacts on the structure of the economy. So addressing income inequality directly, not only indirectly, should actually become part of part of this strategy going forward.
Yeah. All right. So, Trevor, last night, gathering from the discussions that were held, it really zoomed into Chapter 3 and 11 of the plan to focus on how to achieve an inclusive society through social protection and the labour market. Did you feel it was a success? In your opinion, how did it go?
Yeah, it went well. You know, on the one hand, Alex's paper laid out the problems.
Yeah.
Because in South Africa, we have got very many poor people, many are unemployed, and there is a lot of people relying on social grants, but those social grants are not enough in terms of, extent and the size of the social grants. And there is many people who are unemployed who fall outside of that. So we're able to discuss, how that could be improved. But I think one issue which came out clearly is that if you look at what's going on in the world, in Europe, they are dismantling the welfare state. So there are many, what I can call, anti-poor ideas floating around. The idea that if you give people social grants, you create dependency. So this is a problem. So those are one of the issues which came out clearly. But I think the panel agreed that we do need to protect the vulnerable.
Indeed. I think that's very much so what your paper spoke to as well. How was the reaction? The discussions that came thereof, were they in agreement with you? I mean, is everybody on that same page to reach this goal?
I think that we don't necessarily have complete agreement on the diagnostic. In other words, whether or not our problems arise from whether one of the causal factors in our structural levels of unemployment and continued inequality is in fact the income inequality itself. So the distribution of income in South Africa is enormously skewed. We are one of the worst in the world, and that in itself is a reflection of a problem. Roughly 5% of the top 5% of income earners in South Africa essentially earn 40% of total income, and that puts us really with the worst in the world. And the problem there is that it's quite possible that a large part of those earnings are essentially undeserved at the top end. And what they're doing is essentially crowding out the income capabilities of the lower income groups in South Africa with structural economic, with impacts on both the distribution of consumption in South Africa and also the structure of South Africa's economy. So the issue going forward is that we need to basically look at the instruments that get us a fairer distribution of income, both what's often referred to as the primary distribution of income, which is the before-tax earnings and the after-tax earnings.
Yeah.
And we need to basically have a structure that gets us to a point where we probably have about 20% of total earnings as a maximum in the top 5%. So this is something that's not in the plan, and I think there's not total agreement on that. Other views would say, well, our problem is exclusively related to the fact that we have a problem with education, with the fact that a lot of people do not have adequate educations to drive adequate incomes at the lower end. I'm saying that is not sufficient. That is one of the factors, but it is not in itself the only factor to take into consideration.
All right, so this is, these are series of that going on. I mean, the vision is 2030 to implement everything. We're around about 15 years, a couple of months here or there to go. Are we there? Do you think this can be achieved?
Yeah, well, firstly, the time frame is a bit long for many people because people are poor today.
Absolutely,
and if you tell a granny that we'll sort it out in 2013, they just cry, you know. Yeah, and then also, as Alex is pointing out, you see, there is a crisis in the world. The capitalist economy, the system is in crisis. You remember 2008, the crashes of the big banks. So this is going on. Now, as the elite try to manage this crisis, they disagree how best to do it. So we have the same problem in South Africa. You find that the Department of Finance, the Department of Economic Planning, so there's all these views. So we've got the problem. So I would say that it is time now for ordinary people, for the working class, for the poor, to stand up and be counted and put their views across. I think the debate is happening too much behind closed doors and excluding, the mass of ordinary people.
How do South Africans do that? How do we get our voices heard?
Well, at the moment, people are frustrated. That's why you have community protests, strikes. So it's like, the masses are banging on the door and saying, open up. Let us have our voice. So I think it is for the government, it's for the big business to actually, not send police when people protest or strike, but rather listen to what the people are saying.
Well, I think that's a good note to leave it on. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you very much. I know that this could have gone on for another hour because it's, this is vital to every South African's lives. It's great conversations that were being held. From the Wits School of Governance, Professor Alex van der Heever, who delivered the paper last night, and so who's a social security expert, and of course Trevor Ngwane talking to us here on Morning Live. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a break.